We need to have an honest conversation about home field advantage and what it truly means and how it should be measured overall. Having a great home crowd can do a lot for a team. That's obvious. It fires you up, causes problems with pre-snap communication for the other team, and can boost momentum towards your side in a big way. But rarely can it consistently overcome a bad team or a team that is truly outmatched from a personnel standpoint. You can have an average team or a bad team be able to hang around in a game against a better team because of it, but by no means does it totally bridge the gap. That's why basing who has the best home field advantage on wins and losses alone isn't the best way to do it. Where it becomes a massive factor is within the margins of a matchup between two teams that are somewhat similar or close in personnel ability. It can make the difference. But saying a team doesn't have a great home field advantage because they lost against a superior team or they don't win every time at home versus a superior team is not the best way. Look at Auburn, for example. Jordan-Hare is a voodoo factory. It's a witch palace. But if your team is vastly outmatched over a 4-quarter game, you are most likely going to lose. And I've never heard a player ever complain about the noise mid-play or while the play's going on, while they're running a route or running the ball. It's mostly being able to communicate correctly pre-snap offensively. Though I will say, when we played at Tennessee, the ground was literally shaking, so that could have had some effect. So home field advantage is a real thing, do not get me wrong. But the measurement of how great a home field advantage is should be determined by the personnel matchup on the field for that game, not just the outcome or result of that game or games over time. A guy who played in one of the best home field advantages at the Big House, former Michigan quarterback David Cone. And to be honest with you, Blaine, you played at a place that has a big home field advantage. It's like the highest altitude field in the world.
Damn it, who cares? I'm a dragon. Throw the intro.
At Western State, Colorado.
Yeah, baby, it's Friday.
It's flaming chocolate.
It's Dragon Friday. Guess what's hitting today? The over, boys. I already heard 2 come out of Crain's mouth, so let's get ready.
Those don't count.
Those don't count, but it's good. It's good. I like it's flowing out of his mouth already. He's used to saying it.
Yeah, you've said that before.
You're damn right.
David, when it comes to home field advantage, how do you measure it overall? Because we talk about, like I saw this on, the reason I'm talking about I saw this all over social media yesterday. You know, and some of it's like engagement farming and all that stuff. But honestly, I want to get down to the crux of what is the best way overall? Like, what are the 3 factors or even 2 metrics that you would measure a home field advantage, right?
That's a good question. I mean, I always look for penalties. I'll give you a good personal example here. A couple of weeks ago, I was able to go up to Ann Arbor for the Michigan and Texas game. Michigan, you talked about it being one of the best home field advantages. Not one of the loudest stadiums, though. But again, you have 114,000 people in there. That is an advantage. Well, look, man, it was rocking in there. And you could tell Michigan fans really loud on Texas's first drive. It played a factor. Had a couple false start penalties. Texas ends up driving down, but that drive stalls. They end up missing a field goal. That played a factor in that. But all of a sudden, Texas goes up 14-0, 14-3. The crowd's kind of taken out of it because of what you were talking about, better personnel. And from there on, the crowd really wasn't a factor. Maybe the crowd can get up on big third down, something like that. But after that point, you've kind of neutralized, right, the crowd because you had better personnel and were able to take a lead. That's just one example that comes to mind just because it's the most recent for me. And I was actually in that environment as a fan, whereas most of the time I was in the Big House, I was down on the field, which is a different, you're trying to clear the mechanism
and it's so much louder down on the field than it is in the stands.
Yeah, and it's a different loud too, right? Like where I was sitting this past time was like right behind one of the walls, and people are banging on that. So it's a different experience. But you always make a great point, which is a lot of times teams can play better on the road because you clear the distractions. Maybe you're not having to worry about getting 25 family members tickets to the game. Maybe you don't have to worry about where y'all going to dinner reservations after. You just get to go on the road and handle your business. I'm not saying, that necessarily makes up for all of the real factors that you can get from playing on the road, which are noise, distractions, having to have, nonverbal communication to get snaps and all that. But I do think that's an important point that you always bring up.
And penalties, obviously, especially when the opposing team or the road team is on offense, can even out a talent gap, right? Because starting in 1st and 15 a lot puts you at a disadvantage as opposed to being in 1st and 10. Flaming Dragon, I want to make sure everybody understands. Wins and losses matter. I'm not saying that doesn't matter when it goes to home field advantage. And I used Auburn as an example because even going back to the team with Bryce Young in the Iron Bowl, where Auburn had worse personnel than Alabama, but they were able to lead for most of the game and had a chance or keep the game tight, had a chance to win it at the end, but didn't. Going back to last year, obviously against Georgia, they had lower personnel than what Georgia had. They were able to stay in the game the whole time, but eventually lost it. Alabama, same thing, even though it was 4th and 31, which is a totally different type of illness. But when you look at home field advantage, like what are a couple things? I know David mentioned penalties, but where do you kind of draw the line in, hey, wins and losses, they do matter. We have to look at the record and say they obviously play better at home. But, like, there's so many other factors that go into it.
Absolutely. I think fans can keep teams in games, but players at the end of the day will win you football games. What do they say? A good crowd's worth a touchdown and a good band's worth a field goal, so you can get probably 10 points out of it. There's a lot of things you look into it. Obviously, the first thing you look into is penalties. Right, the away team, how many penalties, false starts, illegal motions, those type of things, and communication in a style way that an offense runs. Is it an up-tempo, quick signals, get it out, or is it a huddle up? Look, you can only do much as a crowd. You can only do so much as a fan. At the end of the day, the coaches and players have to win the game. And you brought up Jordan Hare. That's a great place to bring up Bermuda Triangle of football, but it doesn't matter. Look, it doesn't matter. In the clutchest moments, players will have to go out and win you games. You saw that in Oklahoma, and that's what great teams do. And some teams prefer to play on the road, right? Yeah. They like to go on the road and look, it's great to score in front of your home crowd and get everybody going, but you know what's better than that? Shutting everybody up. As a player, right. That's what I enjoyed.
And a game this weekend that we're going to get into and break down. Remember, the phone lines are going to open 2:45 p.m. Central. We want to hear from y'all, 1-855-236-3228. We're going to get into the chat, the YouTube chat, Daily Wire chat, all that stuff. But Ole Miss, South Carolina this weekend. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss dropped a game where they felt like they were the better team at home, and you got to give Kentucky their flowers, obviously. And some people, and I've gone on some Ole Miss shows, and I've talked to some Ole Miss people, are like, oh no, now we got to go on the road. But to the point that you brought up, and something we talk about a lot here, that may be the best thing for Ole Miss. One, Lane Kiffin's gone radio silent on social media after last week, remember.
Following my man's advice.
That's crazy how that works.
By the way, how's the over-under? What's the over-under today? Is it 1.5?
Yeah, we're going 1.5 today.
One and a half today. Okay, so, but if I'm an Ole Miss fan, like I'm telling you guys right now, this may be the best case scenario because nothing brings a group of guys together like realizing, hey, we're going to have to leave the confines of where we feel the safest to go out and play in a game you have to win. The preparation level, knowing you're going out on the road and playing a good team, a quality team on the road in a hostile environment, it locks you in even more. Like there's teams that are super focused every single week, but the human condition is the human condition. And knowing that if I was, and I'm not trying, I hate to make this comparison sometimes, but I think it's the only one I can think of. War and football are different. But if I was going to have to go fight a war on somebody else's turf, my preparation to be locked in, to know the ground, the lay of the land, where they're at. You hear them talk about D-Day, how they had everything, like from the hedgerows to everything laid out right there. So they knew and they had to prepare and focus. If I'm here, I've got to be here. This is there, this is there. At home, I don't have to worry about that. I know where everything else is. It just does something. It locks you in a little bit more going on the road. And I think that might benefit Ole Miss this week.
Let me ask you this, since we don't talk about this a lot and you were a defensive coach, we think about communication only being an offensive thing. But when the crowd is really, really loud, the defense has to communicate too. And I think you said something recently, I don't know how you put it, but when the crowd is really loud, like that affects the defense, affects the home team defense, but the away offense. How did you guys manage your communication when you knew that that's when the crowd was going to be the loudest?
Well, I always hoped that we would play in front of a smart crowd that knew when their team was on offense to, hey, shut up.
Yes.
Don't talk. Don't screw up our own offense. I mean, why do you think the quarterback does this?
But I'm talking about the flip side of it.
No,
when they're trying to be as loud as possible because the away offense is on the field, that's still your home defense, but they have to communicate too.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So you're talking about if I was at home. I thought you meant when we were going on.
No.
Sorry,
if you're at home and you're the defensive coordinator.
Again, you have to get the calls in, right? But calling a defense, in most cases, not in every case, is a little bit simpler than calling an offense because defense is reactionary. I can tell the guy a call that I want. I know the personnel. I have the guy up top telling me or down low, wherever, depending on where I'm at as the DC, hey, it's 11 personnel. All right, I know my calls to 11 personnel. I've got my sheet. I know their tendencies. But until they line up, then the checks get made. right? It's a reactionary thing from a formation standpoint because you can line up in one formation, right? You can line up in 11 personnel and be in doubles, or deuce as we called it, out of 11 personnel, because true doubles is out of 10 personnel. But if you motion that tight end back into the hip, that's going to change the call. So the calls weren't as long. Like when you do your huddle ups and you're those calls that Loeffler and them told you, they're pretty long. You're basically telling everybody what to do. Defensively, the calls typically aren't that long, and the checks are very quick, and we would have hand signals as well on the checks, depending on, if it was the secondary or it was the front seven. But then you have some defenses that are like what Gary Patterson did at TCU, where you had a different call for each level. You actually had 3 different calls, and they would have to marry up, so everybody would have to know it. But I never worried about that as much. Now, going on the road...
You just wanted the crowd to be as loud as possible?
I wanted the crowd to be as loud as possible.
Okay.
And I would always tell my guys, listen, if we're all wrong, we're all right. If we are going to screw up the call, let's all screw up on the same page. If I wanted cover 3 and you called cover 2, let's make sure that everybody's running cover 2.
Not one guy.
I don't want us to be wrong, but if we're going to be wrong, everybody be wrong. Because if we're all wrong, we're all right, and we can at least be sound. I may not like what we're running to the look we're getting, but God forbid, at least we are sound in the back end and in the whole defense as a defensive coordinator having to call it all. So, but going on the road, you always wanted a smart crowd. You wanted a crowd that would be like, hey, we're on offense, everybody be quiet. Well, then it makes the communication a lot easier for us defensively because the crowd is smart. The other thing that used to worry me about going on the road as a defensive guy was the officiating. Because a crowd can have an effect. Like, again, referees, they're not supposed to, but they are human beings as well. I mean, they're supposed to be human beings, but they're supposed to be even. It doesn't matter road or away. It's amazing how many late flags you get on you defensively on the road. Because all of a sudden there's a pass down the sideline. And it may be pass interference on the defense. It may not be. But all of a sudden the crowd roars. Everybody's going nuts. And that ref just panics and throws the flag. Like, those are the 2 things that used to worry me the most. But I used to love the act of going on the road, right? Getting on the bus, going to the airport if we have to fly, or driving the bus there. I used to just it was different. It was a different vibe. It's like you're going to invade somebody. It's like the Vikings, man. Like, they just used to go take your stuff, take all what they wanted, and then claim it as theirs. That's what I like. And the speeches before going on the road, being in the hotel before the game, in the defensive meetings, talking to the guys, because defense is different.
Oh, yeah, we know.
It's different. Like, it's not that offense be aggressive and physical and all that stuff, but defense, you're like, you know what it is. Like, it's you want to be the aggressor. You want to throw the heavy punches. See, now y'all get me fired up. Like, now I'm starting to get like flashbacks. I loved going on the road. I loved taking the show on the road. I loved going to Tuscaloosa and doing the show. Half of them knew that we're Auburn fans. They know that doesn't factor in our analysis, but I like going there. I don't know. Part of me likes that stuff.
All right, chat, hit that subscribe button. If you donate, it'll be on topic. It will get read on this beautiful Dragon Friday. We're going to start the day off with Titan. What's up, brother? It says, this is exactly what happened with Utah playing Arizona last weekend. The crowd was a very big factor, but as the game went on, the crowd slowly got silent and more silent, and you could tell it was going down.
Yeah, and obviously Utah not having Cam Rising hurt, but it's, again, I always tell the story, David, and I've told it on here about when we went to play Tennessee, and we were a 45-point underdog. 45-point underdog. They were laughing because it was first year in Division I. It was basically a startup program at South Alabama, and we go out there, and they're running through the tee. I mean, Coach Jones is giving the pregame speech. We're under the stadium, and people are stomping. There's dust coming down. It was like out of a movie, man. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and we're just on a knee in the gravel underneath right outside the visitors' locker room. And we run out there, and it's so loud. And David, I'm sure it was like this at Michigan, even though Michigan's not one of the loudest places. When you're on the field, it's so loud, it's one audible noise. Like, you couldn't hear individual. It's one audible noise of just, like, it's absolutely incredible. And we get the ball first, go straight down the field, and Ross Matheny scores a touchdown. And all of a sudden, all those Tennessee fans, and it was packed out. This was like early in Butch Jones' tenure. They're just quiet. And you look up, and there's like 45. And it might as well have looked like one person in a sea of orange, but red, like doing the pom-poms. And it is just, it's like that part on Kenny Powers when Stevie's like, I feel 10 feet tall right now. Hey, what's up, YouTube? Appreciate you guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Going to be dropping content all the time as usual. We're just glad you're here.